Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for April 10th, 2018 at, it's 7:14 to call the meeting to order. Roll call, attendance,
Sue Lucio present.
Gordon Clark, yes.
and Cindy King is present. Could you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the meeting is being video and tape recorded. Is there anyone else in the audience that's going to be taping? Okay, Lisa's going to be taping. Anyone else? All right. If anyone decides to, please just interrupt me briefly and let me know. Chairman's additions and deletions, I don't have anything. Do we have anyone have anything that I don't know about? Okay. So tonight we're here to have a joint meeting with the FinCom to go over, this is a public hearing for the fiscal year 19 budgets.
Madam Chair, you should each have a copy of the budget book that has the word draft removed for the first time. The second part of which is the actual database with the omnibus budget, which is the salary and expense by department, followed by the line item breakout for each department, and then the associated charts that back it up in terms of revenue, expense, water, enterprise funds, and state aid. So we've gone over that quite publicly, quite often over the last 3 months. Be happy to entertain any questions that members of the board, finance committee, or the public have on that. If you turn to the book, the very beginning, there's required by charter that the town administrator present a narrative budget letter explaining the high points in what's being presented. So if you'll indulge me to go through this. Dear taxpaying and voting citizens of the town of Townsend, this is my second full budget cycle working for you. I'm proud to say that as a result of another year of the leadership of your Board of Selectmen, the discipline of your Finance Committee, and the hard work of your public employees, we are in strong financial position. We've made tremendous progress over the past 2 years, and our fiscal house is all the better for it. This is the first full year of employing our new 5-year revenue expense forecast budgeting tool. This tool allows us to perform detailed and data-sensitive financial modeling, all toward the goal of sustainably budgeting
Sustainably budgeting.
Yeah, I don't know where that is.
Second paragraph, first sentence. Second
Modeling towards sustainably budgeting for the service needs of our residents today while simultaneously remaining cognizant of the impacts of doing so on our future. In addition to implementing a 5-year revenue expense forecasting model, we have also drafted and enacted best practice financial policies and procedures that will serve as a guideline for future incumbents in leadership positions. For the past 2 years, we've continued to avoid the prior practice of using the town's limited savings to fund ongoing obligations, a method that is counter to best practices in municipal management. Your select board and finance committee are to be commended in this, and I am both proud and pleased to have played a role in breaking that cycle. We've been making these strides, all the while living under the constraints of a relatively flatline state aid over the past few years. In fact, state aid to cities and towns has yet to recover from pre-recession levels, and inflation has even further eroded the value of this revenue source. The very difficult situation is further impacted by the slowing of local municipal revenues, and most significantly, the constraints we are up against living under the limits of Proposition 2.5. Balanced budget. Under the terms of the town bylaws and town charter, I'm obligated to prepare and present a balanced budget, and I have done so herein. We are in this strong of a position as a direct result of the manner in which you have, both in management on the front lines of service delivery, conducted yourselves. In this budget, I've taken clear direction from the Board of Selectmen. Above all, the board's battle cry has been an attempt to retain the current level of service to the town citizens while doing so in a cost-effective and efficient manner. Above all, the board's primary objective has been, wherever possible, to retain the current level of services to the town citizens in a cost-effective and efficient manner. The board's vision, as shared with me through policy framework, was instrumental in guiding this process. In my tenure, I've clearly heard the mantra, live within your budget. I've heard it from the floor of town meeting to the seats in the coffee shops. The sentiment has been repeated so often and so loudly, it's now somewhat of a second nature to me in my budget calculus here in Townsend. What is in this budget? As presented, the fiscal year 19 budget shows an increase of $1.132 million, or 5.3% over fiscal year 18. The North Middlesex Regional School District assessment increase of 4.93% equals $1.021 million, or 90% of the total increase for fiscal 19, while the increase for general government for town service is a modest $240,000, or a 1.1% increase over last year. Some of the highlights of this proposed budget for fiscal 19 are: in municipal service, a part-time human resource position. It previously existed in the town hall but fell victim to prior year budget cuts. Non-union positions that were recommended by the town's prior HR consultant to be reclassified in the town's compensation plan are to be adjusted. The town accountant position is being increased from 37.5 hours per week to 40 hours per week. An additional hour per week of staff time is added to the collector's office in anticipation of meeting our outside auditor's recommendation regarding water billing. The Conservation Commission administrative support position is to be increased by 5 hours, consistent with the mid-year adjustment that was recently made. Pay rates for advanced life support medics are being increased in the second year of a multi-year plan. The funding for the highway superintendent position is being split to cover the current new incumbent, with the residual used to fund the previously existing part-time administrative support position for the department. Adding 2 additional highway positions, 1 truck driver and 1 laborer in place of 1 vacant operator. The library director position is being increased from 37.5 hours to 40 hours per week. The children's librarian position is being increased from 37.5 hours per week to 40 hours per week. All municipal employees are slated to receive a 2% cost of living adjustment and a step in the town's salary matrix if they are not at the maximum step. Education. The school committee voted assessment figures have been met in this budget. The school resource officer position is funded in the fiscal 19 school budget. Employee benefits. The town's retirement assessment is fully funded. The town significantly reduced the health insurance expense by negotiating plan design changes. And in closing, I'd like to close by offering my sincere thanks to each of the members of the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, the Finance team, comprised of the town accountant, the treasurer collector, and the assessor, as well as the general government employees that have contributed to the solution that is this fiscal 19 budget. Throughout the budgeting process, we've learned a great deal about ourselves and how we do the public's business. We've learned how to do more with less instead of taking the easy way out and giving in to the notion that we should either try to take more money from you or that we should resign to be satisfied in doing less with less. We do whatever is required of us, and if the money is short to fund the existing structure, we don't fret. We set to work to rebuild the structure to fit the money. Sincerely, James M. Kreider, Jr., Town Administrator.
Thank you.
What follows, Madam Chair and members of the Select Board and the Finance Committee, are all of the documents that you saw last year in our new budget format, with the additional inclusion of some graphics that have been requested to put into the document this year. So not only do you have narrative, but you have the graphics, and then for those that are so inclined, the whole back half of the document is the underlying data. So with that, I would entertain any specific questions from members of the Select Board, Finance Committee, and then if it's the board's wish for members of the public.
Madam Chair, there's a couple of things that I don't remember talking about last week when we talked about the budget for the third time. The West Townsend Fire Station, that still is in the operating budget. Is that correct?
Say that again.
The West Townsend Fire Station, the debt
Yes, yes, it is.
Still in the
Yes.
operating budget.
Correct.
Do you want to talk a little bit about,
Certainly.
I mean, I know we can put it in there and
Sure.
still have what we have, but,
Just by way of background, when the town goes to town meeting and asks to borrow for something that's allowed to be borrowed for, we pay the bill, just like you get a credit card bill at home. We pay that debt bill out of the existing money we have in the budget. If the town votes to borrow and also votes that it should be paid outside of the regular budget, which is constrained by Prop 2.5, town meeting can vote to do that, and it's called a debt exclusion. So you're basically allowed to borrow more than Prop 2.5 limit, and,
that's an override.
no ma'am, it's a debt exclusion. And debt exclusion is more than the amount that you're otherwise authorized under Prop 2.5, but only for a limited period of time, that period of time to pay back the loan.
Okay, so the exclusion part has to do with, it's not in the regular budget, therefore it doesn't grow by 2.5. If it's an exclusion, it doesn't grow by 2.5 for the years to come.
Yes, I'll come at it the other way. If you do a general operating override, so not a debt exclusion, you say, we're gonna raise taxes, town meeting votes, and it's voted at the ballot. We're gonna raise taxes by $1 million every year. That stays as a part of our new base that then gets subjected to 2.5% next year and each year thereafter.
And any time we leave something in the budget, if we were to underfund what we have, if we didn't even hit 2.5.
Right.
All right, we only raised it by 1%, say, then that total would be what we're judged on for the following year for 2.5% increase.
Not necessarily. You're allowed to reclaim excess levy capacity up to 3 years, I believe, backwards.
Yeah, okay, but if we leave the fire station in there,
In the operating
in
budget.
the operating budget, and it consists of this much money, this much money contributes to 2.5% increase for the budget for next year,
Which,
because it's not excluded.
understood.
From 2.5.
And the only time that would really, the only time there would be a distinction to draw with that statement would be if you have the $150,000 debt for the fire station in the budget, and you're right, that's part of our existing levy limit that grows by 2.5% each year.
Right.
So those $150,000 grow by 2.5%. What you're saying is if it wasn't, and it was instead debt excluded, it wouldn't be growing.
That's right.
If the implication is that there would then be a savings, that would only be true if that 155 within the budget that you now freed up wasn't spent. If you spend it,
That's right.
you're right where you were.
That's right, exactly. Okay, so,
Bless you.
but I, and the only reason I'm bringing this up was because you and I had talked about this, and originally I was saying, well, wait a minute, by not doing a debt exclusion, we're taking that 150,000 or whatever that payment is, and we're not able to spend it within the operating budget.
Right.
Okay, so, I mean, we've been living with it, and it seems to be affordable, so fine, let it stay there, is how I ended up, anyway. But, because otherwise, we could have taken that out and said, if we needed that 150 for something major, okay, we could have taken that out and said, you know what, guys, you already voted to approve it. Now, if you vote for debt exclusion, that frees up 150,000 in the operating budget.
Correct.
But we're not doing that.
Right.
But it frees it up, but that's where the term exclusion does not mean there's they're saving any money anymore. It's not
No.
reducing.
Unless you don't spend that
I mean,
150
right,
that
but when you're
free up.
talking inside the levy limit, you're talking, when you use the term debt exclusion, you are talking about what I like to call it a temporary override, because for the taxpayers, it's an override, but it's just for a short period of time.
For the debt.
It's not permanent. It's not a permanent, but it does raise the taxes if you don't need to do it as a debt exclusion, which, I mean, we've got a tight budget here, but if you can afford it, to keep it in the general budget,
And it
then
seems
fine,
that
then
this
it
year we
doesn't
can,
impact
so.
the taxpayers. We're living within our means, we're at our levy limit, we don't have to worry about an underride. But if we don't have to do an override, or a debt exclusion, using that same language, the taxpayers aren't gonna have their taxes increased
Right.
in order to see that. And I'm glad that we're able to get a budget where we're keeping that in the operating budget, because of all the other stuff that we do have out there that is debt exclusion that has yet to kick, so the taxpayers don't have to deal with it.
And to kind of put a bow on this for what Sue and I talked about, normally if you have a new project that hasn't been authorized yet, you go to town meeting and say, can we get your authorization to borrow $1 million for the water project? And will you let us debt exclude it? It would have the vote at town meeting to authorize the borrowing, and then a companion vote at the ballot box to confirm it as a debt exclusion. Because it's already been authorized to borrow the money for the West Townsend station, that piece of the two-part process is done. So conceivably, if in a year or 2 or 3, the town finds itself saying that 150 cannot be absorbed within the operating budget any longer, we're going to go out and ask the taxpayers. You would not have to go to town meeting and to the ballot, because the town meeting's already been done. You could just go to the ballot. But we're not talking about that at this point.
Right.
Thank you. Question on the MIS budget.
Yes.
If we go to the line item, which would be fiscal 19, page 43 of the line item budget is what I had in my other one. I don't know if it's the same.
Yep.
Just a question for clarification.
Sure.
I meant to ask before. We have the director
Correct.
salary. We have a salary technician. Who's that?
There is not currently that position funded in the budget.
Okay. And public access, is public access paid from Comcast?
It's paid from the PEG access receipts. We talked about that last week. If you
Yeah.
If you go back and look in the revenue section, there's an amount of income that we realize because of the contract that you negotiated with Comcast. We're allowed to bring into the budget to support the production of public educational and governmental access
My
television.
question is, from an accounting perspective, why isn't that like in a revolving fund, similar to the way that we'd do the,
It's in what's called a receipts reserved account, which is the way DOR requires it be set up. It's very much like what we're talking about in the warrant, doing with the cemetery commission. They have historically had a cemetery improvement fund. DOR has said that should be in a receipts reserved account.
Okay.
It's a distinction without much difference operationally, but technically from an accounting standpoint, it's what DOR requires.
okay, and that money, because it's revenue, is all part of our levy limit anyway, right?
No, it's outside taxation.
So if it's,
So it's-
that's my point, if it's outside taxation, why isn't it pulled out like we did, like the resource officer, for example? Remember how that comes in from something, is from somewhere else, and it's dedicated to a purpose?
But that was a specific case of, we don't know that we're going to have that function occur, which is what we found ourselves in last year. We know that we have cable, we know that we have equipment, we know that we have the need, and we do in fact function by performing the public educational and governmental access stuff. We're doing that ourselves. We have control over that internally. So we're able to have that show as a revenue inside the budget because we control both sides of that, the revenue as well as the expense. The SRO is a little different. We control the expense, we have the body, but we don't have the control of the revenue.
Okay, I hear you. Facilities,
Yes.
we have, for this year, we've put together the lawn care with the cleaning that gets done, contractor that we have come in to do the cleaning.
Yep.
Do you know what the breakdown of those is?
Without pulling the file, I think the landscape maintenance was 20, Carolyn, you know, 23? I think it was 23,000 for the landscape contracts for all of
And
the
the
buildings.
balance for the cleaning?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. And the police versus, the leasing versus buy, did that,
It's budgeted in a fashion that allows that decision to be made by the
Later.
board with discussion and input from the chief. And it's budgeted to either reflect a purchase of one or a lease of three.
okay. And state aid is looking a little bit more promising.
We're not counting on it. This is still on the low end.
I know.
So we got a number of places
But that
we've...
would be nice.
In other places, we've budgeted conservatively. One of the things we talked about, Sue, in terms of the debt with the West Townsend Station was trying to find a way to leave something on the table. Because, as you've stated, this budget is budgeted to the dollar, right? Now, it's budgeted to the dollar against the revenue projections that appear in the back of this, God bless you, appear in the back of these documents. But what should be understood is those revenue projections are very conservative. So, for instance, we're counting on unrestricted general government aid from the state at X dollars. We know we're going to see more than that, particularly in an election year, but we're not counting on that. We know that excise tax, based on trends, should be coming in higher than we've projected. So we've got built into the revenue projections, because they're conservative, the reasonable expectation we're going to see more money coming across the table. So if we run into difficulties. The other thing is, and we talked about this last week as well, the school department, the North Middlesex Regional School District has voted an assessment that for us is 4.93%, or roughly a $500,000 increase. But we have been told that we should expect that will come down. So that too will contribute to having a little bit more wiggle room throughout the course of the year.
And from what I've read too, it sounds like the districts might get a little bit more money back,
They should.
which it'll help on that side too.
Still early for that.
I don't know. I mean, I was just reading about it the other day, so you're talking about it anyway.
Right.
MMA is doing a really good job of lobbying for us.
Sure.
They're doing an excellent job. Thank you. That is all of the questions that I had on the budget.
You have anything, Gordy?
Do you have any questions? All my questions were professionally answered last week when we unanimously approved the budget, so I have none.
Yeah, and I'm pretty, and I just want to, I was looking at I'm ahead, but I was looking at my large print for
Yeah.
us blind people. Very nice. I like that. Thank you. You really went out of your way to make sure I can read it, so that's awesome. I have, I'm good. I'm good, thank you.
Members of the Finance Committee, anything? Members of the board, the Finance Committee did vote last Thursday by a majority vote to approve the budget as presented. I believe that the vote was a 4-to-1 vote. So what you have before you that you have unanimously adopted, the Finance Committee has adopted by a 4-to-1 vote. So we will be going to town meeting with a consensus budget between recommended, accepted and adopted by the board, accepted and adopted by the Finance Committee, which will be the second year running that we've had a unified front coming in at the budget.
Are we going through the,
Oh, before we leave budget, I don't know if there's anybody in the audience, if it please the board, that has any questions about.
Lauren?
Just curious, is there any way for town meeting to put the headings on each page rather than just in the beginning?
When, and this is something that Cindy was just talking about, when you go to town meeting, you're going to have a copy of the warrant. You'll also have that book to look at any level deeper in detail you want. But the warrant is going to have the numbers that, as
I mean, on
no,
on
she
the individual
needs the little
columns.
sheet.
It's on the first, no, see,
She's looking at the line, at the omnibus and the summary.
yeah, you have the heading for the, and the
She's
first
talking
page.
about
No, I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is what's
Yeah.
before the town meeting actually does have
Oh,
the
will be
headings
in
on
there.
every page, on every page.
All right, thank you. Yep.
Anybody else? So everybody understands the budget in and out, inside and out? Got it down, right? Until May 1st, then all changes.
On that point, Madam Chair, I'd spoken with the moderator about the prospect of doing something I gather Townsend has done in the past, maybe not recently, which is to hold a kind of a mock town meeting, which is basically pick a date between now and town meeting. It can be either a posted meeting if a majority of members of any boards want to come, or it can just be staff. But the way John spoke to me about it is something that Gene used to do apparently, where you just sit down in a very informal fashion and go over each article as though we were sitting at the town meeting. So people that might feel a little more comfortable speaking in a smaller group, or that have a little more detailed question than might be able to be gotten to on the floor of town meeting, they get a chance to do it in advance. So hopefully we'll be able to pull that off. I know that it's something that John's interested in doing too.
Okay.
When?
Sometime between now and the town meeting, so we're coming up on 3 weeks.
I was gonna say,
so
but, yeah, again, when?
You meet a week from,
Exactly.
you meet a week from,
We're back.
you meet a week
For
from
you to
tonight to
say.
post. Once it's posted, we conceivably could the week after, which would be the week before town meeting.
What time are we meeting at, a week from tonight?
You haven't said it yet, but it'd be a very brief meeting, just to do the posting and pick up a
Yeah,
couple of
we're
the
planning on
things we
meeting
talked
that night
about.
anyway, the 24th, because we already have things on the agenda.
Yeah, right, yeah.
The 24th.
Yeah.
Oh, but there's a meeting between now and the 24th, next Tuesday.
Yeah, next Tuesday we have a meeting
We're
to
meeting
post.
next Tuesday, but we also are
The
going to
24th already have
we
something.
already have stuff on the.
All due respect, Madam
getting on the
Chairman, that's
agenda.
outside the circle of my concern.
Really? You're not gonna come anyway? You're not gonna
No,
come and
but
sit in the audience?
Thank you for trying to include me,
Come
but
on.
next
I
Tuesday,
mean, once you get it,
I'm very interested.
You're not gonna
next
miss
week.
us?
No, it's nothing to do with that, it's outside the circle of my concern. Thank
Okay.
you.
So to the warrant,
Okay.
you should each have a copy of the warrant that no longer says draft because you adopted it at your last meeting. I draw your attention to this document that I have that you don't yet have because I just did it today, but this will be the cover of the warrants. Just basically says who you all are and who the moderator is and the dates and what's contained. More importantly, on the very next page, which will be the inside cover, is the cheat sheet. It basically goes down the list of special town meeting articles, annual town meeting articles, with the first column being the number of the article, the next being the description of the article, the next being the amount of money sought, if any. The next would be the funding source, if any money is being sought. The next would be Prop 2.5 impact, if any, which in this warrant there are none. There are no considerations for overrides or debt exclusions. The next would be a column for Board of Selectmen votes, and finally a column for FinCom votes. So people have the ability with just the inside of the document they're working off of to be able to refer back to a cheat sheet to see what's coming, how the boards respectively voted on it. So I do have the votes of the FinCom plugged in, with the exception of one that I must have fallen asleep on last Thursday night because I have no notes at all about what you guys did on the Article 15 Conservation Land Fund, so I just need to get that from you guys. So, going to the warrant then. The special town meeting is very brief, it's just 3 articles, and the first of them is if there are any unpaid bills from prior years, which as of right now we don't have any. The next is snow and ice deficits. As of right now, we're sitting at, I have the form with me somewhere. I just got it from Lori.
Is it like 141?
A little over 140, yeah. I think maybe 141 or 142. 142,000, which is markedly better than we've been in at least the past 2 years. Before that, I haven't looked back to check, but we've done pretty well. Yeah, there still could be weather, we know.
You could still have another.
And the third article, the final article on the special town meeting warrant, comes in from the water commissioners, and it is to seek the authorization to purchase and implement new utility billing software, and this would be funded out of enterprise fund revenues. So the special is pretty brief. You'll next, on page 4, see the annual kickoff. And the annual begins, as it always does, with the appointment of any town officers, unless another provision is made by mass law or town charter. The second article is to hear any reports from any boards, committees, commissions. Under that article this year, there will be a brief statement that would be coming in from the select board based on your prior vote, which would be for the Public Safety and General Government Employee of the Year. I have received input from members of the board on that, so I'll have a little bio drawn up for what has clearly been the consensus for both of those positions. It was easy math for me to do. Next, Article 3, James H. Tucker Fund in accordance with the bequest. Again, usual and customary every year to do that appointment. Next, you'll see Article 4. Article 4 looks a little different than in your earlier draft because the law changed. So now, when you establish or seek to establish new revolvings, like these top 3, the police for the school resource officer, conservation for conservation purposes, and fire EMS for hazardous materials supplies replacement, you have to seek to get those approved first, and then the second piece would be to set the limits, which appear in the box below. You'll also see that after each article, in addition to what has been standard, the submitted by, there's also a description now. So there's a kind of a brief explanation of what the article is about for people that want to do that work in advance and help them understand what it's about or formulate any questions they may have. You next go on to page 6. Article 5 is the operating budget, which again the Select Board has approved and the Finance Committee has approved. The budget description, it's important to take a couple minutes on. This is the usual and customary town budget for next fiscal year, fiscal 19, which begins on July 1st, 2018. As has been customary, you'll be voting by the total for each of the following functional segments. It then has a grid showing the functional segments. General Government, $1,559,881. Public Safety, $3,193,032. Education, $12,927,970. Streets and Highways, $718,930. Solid Waste, $669,284. Human Services, $392,922. Culture and Recreation, $384,817. Debt Service, $507,432. And Insurances, $1,963,196, for the grand total of $22,317,465. The totals for each of those functional segments are also shown in the budget that appears on the next several pages. There's an asterisk that appears at the bottom of the category title, General Government, Public Safety, Education, and so on. And then there's a note also added at the bottom of page 6. It says, a more detailed line item budget is available for informational purposes in your town meeting informational packet. So that, again, is going to go back to this packet that has the narrative, has the charts and graphs, has the salary and expense omnibus budget, and then the full blown out line by line down to pencils and pens budget. So as you go then through the next number of pages, 7 through 21 are the pages that cover the omnibus budget. So that's the by department, by salary and expense, and in functional segments. So you will see, if you first get yourself to page 12, at the very top you'll see asterisks, and it says total general government. There's that $1,559,881 number that appears in the original grid box at the beginning of the article. You next go into public safety. You'll find yourself getting all the way over to page 15, where you see your next asterisk, and it talks about public safety total, and it gives that $3,193,000 number. Education is the next asterisk at the bottom of that same page, 15. Next, you'll see streets and highways, which appears as the functional segment total in the bottom of page 16. Page 17, you'll see the segment total for solid waste. Human services appears in total on page 18. Culture and recreation, page 19. Debt service on page 20. And total insurances and grand total of the budget both appear on page 21. And there are also notes contained on the far right-hand column for anything that looks extraordinary in this budget proposal. There are more detailed notes in the far right column on the line item budget that's contained within your budget packet that you'll have at town meeting as well. So obviously, you start with the omnibus and you can become much more granular each step of the way down, the deeper you dive into this budget handout book. Article 6 is statutorily required to set the compensation for elected officials. We have one. So you'll have already appropriated at town meeting the salary for the town clerk's elected position. But then by law, you have to button it up with a vote under Chapter 41, Section 108 to actually set the amount consistent with what was appropriated. Article 7 is the Water Enterprise Department budget. The budget is consistent with prior years. It's a curious bit of writing when you actually look at how the article reads. To see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of this year coming $981,786.32 from Water Enterprise Fund revenues to operate the water department for fiscal year 2019. The thing that's curious, as is every year, is this next phrase, and in order to fund the cost of intermunicipal expenses, that $233,820.30 of this sum be appropriated to the general fund. So what does that mean? When the town voted to establish a water enterprise fund, what the taxpayers at that town meeting voted to do is require that the water takers pay the bill to support the entire enterprise, that is the water department. Things that you see, we have water bills that we pay as the town of Townsend because we take water, so we should pay for the water. Just like you as a citizen, if you're out and you have public water at your home. From an accounting perspective, there are things, however, that the town proper pays for within its general government budget, like health insurance. So you will see in the town general government budget, the line item for health insurance, $800,000, $900,000. Contained within that number is the appropriation for the 4 positions that have health insurance in the water department. So we pay the bill, we back charge them, that money comes back to cover their pro rata share. Similarly, for workers' compensation, for property and liability insurance, anything that is attributable as an expense to the enterprise that we pay out of our operating budget, they get billed. So that's when it says the intermunicipal expenses, that's what that refers to. So in order to keep the enterprise pure, as it's intended under the law and was voted at town meeting, the water takers should be paying for the entirety of the enterprise. It should not be being subsidized by the general budget.
I understand that, but does that go into, what does that, it goes into the general fund?
It shows as,
Does it show as a revenue?
it does.
Okay,
It
all right.
does. So if
Then
you go to
I'm
the, again, when you get really granular and go to the back end of this document on page, page 69 of the budget book, you'll see what is the Water Enterprise Fund Revenue and Expenditure Sheet. It shows as an expenditure there of the $233,863 that's referenced in the warrant article, and it has a breakdown, so it shows the admin costs, the Medicare, county retirement, insurances, be they workers' comp, property liability, excess liability, auto, insurance, health insurance, debt service for certain pieces of debt that the town covers within its budget that are attributable to the enterprise, and then health insurance. So you get a total that is due, that 233 shows as an expense to the enterprise, and then appears on the revenue sheet
Okay.
as a revenue coming in.
Okay, thank you.
So the next article, capital financial articles, Article 8. This is one that I need to rewind the tape from last week. Last week, I didn't have the benefit of Carolyn sitting in here to throw something at me to let me know that I was reading off the wrong sheet. What I was reading off of was the second page of the capital plan, which included things that had been asked for, but not all of the things that had been granted. So Cindy grabbed me after the meeting and said that she thought that I had spoken about things that weren't approved. So this document that exists in the warrant, which shows police and fire EMS department, police fire radios, $149,820. Police department, police vehicle, $45,000 to be paid out of the operating budget. Highway department, brush mower sidewalk plow, $100,000 capital stabilization. Fire EMS department, third year lease payment, $67,870 out of ambulance receipts. Water department, Meadow Road main replacement, $110,000, water enterprise. Generator, $30,000, water enterprise. One-ton dump truck, $50,000, water enterprise. And pump station bridge replacement, $40,000, water enterprise. For a total of $592,789.52. That is the capital plan. There's one additional piece that you voted, but because it's a borrow, it shows as a standalone article later. That's the $1 million project that the water department put forward. So that needs its own standalone language legally. So there were a couple things that were talked about last week. One in particular that is a hot button issue is road pavement. There was no road pavement money above and beyond Chapter 90 that was approved by the capital plan. So people need to understand that when I said that last week, that was not correct. I was reading off of the ask, not the grant. Everybody follow that? So the article that appears in the warrant is the true capital plan. We all had this with us last week. It was sitting right there. I was reading off of the actual capital plan, second page document.
So as of now, the only money that we have allocated for highways is in the highway budget or in
does.
Chapter 90?
Correct. Any expense money in the highway budget that would be used for roads, which is generally very limited, and then Chapter 90, which is generally between $500,000 and $600,000.
Which they're saying might bump up a little
It's an
bit.
election year, so we would expect that it would, but we're not going to count on it.
MMA is trying to, they're lobbying for it to be a consistent contribution, just so that the towns can count on a certain amount.
Multi-year plans.
Exactly, because, and that's what we talked about, that we need is a multi-year plan of financially, how are we going to...
Sure. If the revenue stream is guaranteed for a number of years, you can borrow against it.
Exactly. Or at least you know that that's what's going to come in, so you can earmark it for that purpose.
Article 9, we're on page 23 now, and this is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer the sum of $25,180. This is for the purpose of funding equipment upgrades and repairs to the town's public safety communications infrastructure. Excuse me. If you look at the description, the selectmen committed to fund $175,000 each year for 3 years to improve the town's public safety communications equipment and infrastructure. This $25,180, when combined with the $149,820 that was authorized in the capital plan in the exact prior article, meets that $175. This is the second of 3 years, so next year would be the last year that that $175 would be coming. Article 10, this is the one we spoke about a moment ago, which is the $1 million borrowing for the engineering, construction, and other related expenses related to replacing a section of water main on Main Street between 512 Main Street, which is the pump station, and Wheeler Road, which is the dead end of the line just before the state park. And this needed to be a standalone article because it has to have that legal language in it authorizing the borrowing. There's a specific provision of the general law. That was submitted by the Water Commissioners. Then we get into Article 11, which is the beginning of the general financial articles. The first is seeking $5,000 to defray the charges and expenses for the planning and execution of the town's 300th anniversary celebration to be held in the year 2032. This one requires a little bit of discussion. Karen Clement is an elected official in town, but when she brought this article forward, she did not bring it as a part of or as a vote by that elected board. She has a right to bring one as an elected official, so I guess I'd ask your feeling on how this should be written, because I had originally written it as Karen Clement Amanda Dwight Fund, but it is not the Amanda Dwight Fund. So should it say just Karen Clement, or because you have adopted it as a part of the warrant, should it say Board of Selectmen and Karen Clement? What's your pleasure on that? Because I don't want to have it read in a way that isn't.
Question for you.
Okay.
Last year, you put something on, and it ended up being owned by the Board of Selectmen, didn't it? Or was it just your name?
It's just her name.
I think it was just me,
Was it?
because I submitted it as an
As a-
elected official.
Exactly, yeah.
So it was just, yeah, it didn't say, it wasn't Cindy King Board of Selectmen, it was Cindy King.
I mean, I don't care, we could adopt it. I guess my question is, who's gonna spend the 5,000?
There will be.
Because we're not authorizing anybody to spend that
Right,
money.
it's my
We're
understanding
just
that there
putting the
will-
money aside.
This is a piggy bank.
It's my understanding that there will be a request to begin putting the committee together at a meeting coming up. There are a couple of folks that have expressed an interest so far. My expectation is that in the first year or so with this limited appropriation, they would do some planning work. They would, begin, what do people want their celebration to look like? We know it's 14 years out. But what do you want it to be? Do you want to see the Shriners on their little bikes again in the parade? Everybody likes it. Or do you want something different? Do you want more music? Do you want, something outside of the norm?
But none of those things cost money.
Right, but putting together a survey, for instance, that goes out to all registered voters or all households, there could be expense involved with that. So I don't think this is going to sit stagnant until the year before and then be bundled and spent. I think the expectation is this is to be used for planning.
Yeah, Once they
Early on.
put a committee together, they
Certainly.
might be able to, part of their enactment would be to authorize them to spend money out of this fund.
Correct.
If the board is
What
okay,
if we didn't want them to spend the whole thing, though? I mean, I can see putting it in a piggy bank, but I guess at the time that they're asking to be appointed, or that they're asking for this committee to be appointed,
You'll volunteer?
no, I will suggest that they could be authorized to spend up to a certain amount of
So
money.
you would set the charge as the board.
we
so.
wanted to, at the
Okay,
time.
that's fine. I mean, I have no problem with this going in as a Board of
I don't
Selectmen
either.
article,
What about you?
as long as Karen's feelings aren't gonna be
So we're
hurt.
still talking, oh, wait. You all said so?
Yeah, I
Oh,
just,
no, I just didn't want to interrupt.
Okay.
What was your question?
Are you okay if we take Karen Clement at Amanda Dwight Fund
I
off and
really
make it a
don't-
Board of Selectmen?
I don't care, all I would care as long as Mr. Crowder believes whatever way we do it is statutorily correct.
Yeah, I think whether you leave it as Karen individually, as in her elected capacity, but not as a part of
Okay.
the elected board, or the Board of Selectmen, or a combination of both. So
I
really,
see
I would
that-
defer to Karen and ask, because she's the one that submitted it, how she
Yeah,
preferred it to
my
be.
comments about taking it on as Board of Selectmen is not to take anything away from Karen. My thinking on it is that if we put the Board of Selectmen as the submitted by, we're, for historical purposes, saying that the Board of Selectmen supported this article, that it's not an elected official came off out of left field and said, I want this, and it was questionable. When the Board of Selectmen have something out there, then we're saying that it's important enough.
it's as if she came to us with a petition in a way.
Or
and-
just,
and
we just said, yes, let's
yeah.
do this, and it's important enough, and it's not gonna be lost in future years when people forget what we talked about tonight. That,
Or we could say Karen Clement and the Board of Selectmen.
okay. Put them both?
I don't care as long as I said before, I think it comes before us with good cause, a good heart, and
Sure.
as long as it's statutorily correct, that's all I care about. Thank you.
And then we'll make Karen read it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need somebody to read it. So we're going to put Karen's name on there so she can read the article. I think Andrea has a question.
Then if she submitted it by a petition, shouldn't it just say that was submitted by
No,
petition?
It was not
It
submitted by
wasn't.
petition. She
It wasn't
submitted it as an
submitted.
elected official.
I thought you were
I
just...
said it would be as if
Oh,
she
I'm
had.
sorry.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so Board of Selectmen and Karen Clement.
Gotcha. Excellent. Next page, Article 12. This is the Master Planning Committee's request for appropriation of $30,000 for funding the hiring of consultants to assist the Master Plan Committee, which is appointed under the Planning Board. Such areas as economic development, community meeting facilitation, research, survey analysis, and other related topics as required and voted on by the Master Plan Committee. Article 13 is the usual and customary $4,000. This is for the assessor's periodic inspections and property data verification program as mandated by the Mass Department of Revenue. Article 14 is $1,500 request for securing a shredding contract to dispose of documents and files that have exceeded their required retention. There are a lot of financial documents that we're still maintaining hard copies of that we're not required by law to keep any longer. We can't just throw them away or recycle them. They must be shredded. So this is the town accountant and the treasurer collector seeking authorization to fund a shredding company. Article 15. Article 15 takes a little bit of discussion too tonight. To see if the town will vote to transfer from available funds the sum of $21,000 to the Conservation Land Fund. This is submitted by the town administrator. I did submit this. I was approached by a former employee who was involved in a project with Department of Fish and Game. Lock Estates was the subdivision, and there were two parcels that were associated with it that were of interest to the Commonwealth because they were adjacent to existing holdings the Commonwealth had. The nickel tour of this was the owner of the parcels who did the development flipped it to the town sold it to the Commonwealth for $21,000. What I was told was that the deal with the Commonwealth required that those funds be used for conservation purposes. So with that understanding, I placed this article. I had somebody question that, and I realized that I hadn't done the research. I had relied on what I was told. I did the research, and there's nothing in the paperwork that was executed between the Board of Selectmen and the Commonwealth that requires the money go for conservation purposes. There's nothing in any deed restriction. I went as far as to pull up the meeting of the Board of Selectmen when the project was explained and the documents were presented and signed, and there's no reference in any of that discussion to this being an earmarked fund. That doesn't mean this can't happen, but I just wanted to be clear because I had been stating that it was part of the deal. I haven't been told that, but it appears to me that while it may have been part of the deal in some conversation, the official record does not reflect that the deal was predicated on these $21,000 being held for conservation purposes. So the article is legitimate. It is here. It's going to be before the town for consideration. But to the best of my understanding, unless somebody can show differently, it's not here as a result of a requirement. It may be what the best intentions of the parties were, which is fine. But we just need to be able to say it accurately.
Is there any other rule or law that it should have been in the paperwork and that it, for whatever reason, didn't happen?
No. The things that were required, it was an interesting transaction. It was Article 97 land is constitutionally protected open space land, and this involved a couple different steps. It involved the town getting approval from the Commonwealth to, by a special act of the legislature, to transfer this, even though it was being transferred as protected open space to another owner who would continue its use as protected open space. Because it was Chapter 97 protected, it had to be voted to be able, by the legislature, to be able to be released. And then subsequently the state put it back in under Chapter 97. So there were a lot of details and a lot of attention paid to this deal, but none of it focused on what the funds at the end of the day were to be used for. There's discussion about, there's several paragraphs in the paperwork where it would seem that it would have been appropriate to see that type of an earmark, where it talks about, and, there shall be $21,000 paid. That's where you would expect to see, to be held by the Conservation Commission for conservation land purposes, but there's nothing in the record that shows that.
How does conservation fund typically get funded?
In my short time here, there's been one town meeting where we had an article where we put some money from free cash in. Beyond that, I'm not certain. I mean, there are a couple different things. They have a wetlands protection fund, so fees they take in for applications goes into the Wetland Protection Act that they have the ability to spend out of. This is different than that. This is a land preservation fund. I'm not certain when it was set up, if there was any structure to how it was to be funded. I just know that in at least one occasion since I've been here, we had an article to put some money in.
Thought Andre had a question.
Yes. I got confused because I talked to the accountant about this, and she told me that DOR, when it came to selling of land, would not let it just go into conservation, that it had to go into a reserve receipt account to be voted out and then given to them.
That is correct.
Oh, when you
So-
explained, I didn't get it that way, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, because I'm talking about this year. That was last year. So you may remember, and if you don't, if you look back at some of the documents from town meeting last year, you'll see there was a discussion on town meeting floor about this very issue. Because there was an article to appropriate it directly to the conservation fund. DOR came back and said, you can't do that. It's a regular receipt, general fund receipt. It's got to come in and go through the system. It comes in as a revenue. At the end of the year, we had more revenue than we had anticipated getting, in large part because there's $21,000 extra that closes to free cash. At a subsequent year, which is now,
Yeah.
you could have an article to appropriate that $21,000 from free cash into the conservation fund.
So this is that same money? This is the new?
This is the second part of that action. It's the same money.
Oh, all right, that's where I got confused. Okay, thank
Oh, I
you.
get it.
It's kind of like counting electrons on
Right. I
it's
had
the same
thought
money,
that
but it's,
when we had discussed it last year, I had thought it had gone ahead and this was an additional amount.
no.
in that
Last year,
line.
they
All
weren't
right,
allowed to do it.
thank
It had
you.
to close to free cash. Any other questions on that one? So again, I don't want that to be heard as lack of support for this, but more a case of
What's in the
offering
conservation
clarity.
land fund now?
I'm sorry?
How much money is in that now?
do not know.
$38,600.
Okay, doesn't buy it too much, does it?
There isn't too much good land left to buy.
The state owns it all.
We sold it. Do that.
Next page, Article 16, and this is one I referenced a little bit earlier. There's a distinction without much practical difference here. This is to take what has been the Cemetery Improvement Fund and change it to the Sale of Lots Receipts Reserved Fund. From a practical perspective, the cemetery commissioners are going to be able to do the same thing they could today. It's just in a different structure that the Department of Revenue requires. So money in from the sale of lots goes into today a cemetery improvement fund, and tomorrow it'll be going into the receipts reserve fund. They can still do the same exact thing with it.
Can I ask you a question again? The ambulance receive reserve account, we had for a long time. The cemetery in parts just didn't get classified the same way because it's so much older?
I don't know. It could be a function of the age of the fund. It could be a function of the fact that it's an elected board. And,
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
they've
Yeah.
just done it the way that, as elected officials, they judge was most prudent. All I know is that DOR has looked at it closely over the last year and said, you just need to put it in the right structure. Same ability at the end of the day to do what they're doing today, but it just needs to be in the right structure.
Right,
So-
thank you.
So I have another question on that. There's money in that, in their old fund?
Correct.
Does that get
It
transferred?
does. So my understanding is the night of town meeting, we'll know whatever that number is. They could buy a rake tomorrow and the number would change. So the night of town meeting, we'll know what that number is.
Okay.
Next, Article 17 is stabilization article. We've talked about this a little bit. at the end of all of your financial articles, ideally, you'd like to be able to put something into stabilization. When we meet with our bond rating companies and they grill us on our financial practices, they look at our reserves. It's one of the indicators of what our financial health is. We are well situated in that regard. We've got strong reserves. But they do like to see a trend. And the trend is not money coming out. They want to see money going in. So if all of the articles above that are financial were to pass, we would still have roughly 20 grand left out of free cash. Additionally, we have, the assessors have voted to make surplus $30,000 from overlay receipts. That's the money that, again, each year we hold aside an amount of money in case somebody challenges their taxes and wins. So we have the money that we can then make sure our budget is still in balance. At the end of 3 years, any of those overlay reserve funds that are still in place and not subject to an appeal, they can release. They have voted to release $30,000 from prior years. So it's possible that at the end of these articles, when we get to 17, consideration to put close to $50,000 into stabilization might be available as
That'd
something.
be your recommendation?
Whatever's left, I would recommend we do.
So you'll have that number that night?
We'll be keeping a live tally as we go through. On that point, before we go, the thing people should understand about that practically is if we don't put it in stabilization, it stays on the table as free cash until the year closes. If we put it in stabilization, it stays in stabilization unless and until it's taken out. The other distinction is if it stays as free cash, it's a simple majority vote at a town meeting to spend it. Once it goes into stabilization, it's a 2/3 vote to spend it. So just in fairness, people should understand that it's much more restricted.
You're putting your savings in a CD, it's a little bit harder to get it out.
Sure.
For my benefit and the benefit of others too, what purposes typically would you use the stabilization account for? What kinds of things?
Imagine a year when the assessment for the regional school comes in at $500,000 higher than last year, and you don't have the ability to make that fit in your budget. And you know that there's already a tax increase coming for the new school, just hypothetically. You might then look towards using stabilization to get through that hump for that year. Ideally, you'd never spend stabilization. Ideally, it continues to grow. And next time you go out to borrow, you pick up a couple of basis points on your interest rate because you've grown your reserves. So you end up putting it to work on the borrowing side of things because it makes you
You're more
a
financially
more
attractive.
financial. Yeah,
I think
just like
we've
your
also
personal.
used it when, basically, the economy has crashed.
Sure.
And that we didn't have the revenues coming in from the state, but yet we still have salaries and expenses are still there, but the revenues, our tax, the values of our homes dropped and the revenues are not
The
coming in.
danger, obviously, in applying it to the operating budget is it's a one-time revenue. The expense exists next year, but that money isn't there necessarily.
But I've seen us
So-
do, a couple times we've had to go in there just to,
Sure. Yep.
as an
I thought-
emergency, not as a basic.
I thought it was more for emergency capital
Yeah,
kinds of things.
usually.
Sure, that's the other piece is
But I know
if
we've
you know,
used it as those kind of urgent
If
operating
One of our
expenses.
fire trucks,
Yes.
I was gonna say building,
Fire
I
on
was gonna say
fire.
a building burns, that's what I was gonna go there. Correct.
I think, Andrea, did you have another question?
No, I was gonna object to what you were saying, but.
We've done it, we've done it.
um,
Not, we shouldn't do it, done it, we've done it.
before I forget, I asked a specific question of, at the school, the building committee meeting last night. I keep hearing, we haven't gotten the final hit, if you will, for the high school project. The reality is that we probably have. It's probably as high as it's going to get in terms of the impact on our assessment, because this last borrowing is like a temporary borrowing to be able to cover the rest of the project. So it's all been borrowed, if you will. At the end of the project, what they'll do is take that temporary and roll it all together. Okay, so if there were money left over, it would be distributed, not distributed back to the towns, but it would lessen that amount. Okay, so the way that it was explained to me by Nancy was that it's pretty much what it's going to be.
And my involvement has been as limited as listening to our financial advisor for the treasurer collector and the treasurer collector talk about it. So my understanding is that we haven't had the full hit yet. There may be something of a lag between when they finalize their borrowing and when it actually hits us. But I think that's something we should know between now and town meeting, definitely, because that'll be a good question to pop on the floor, and we should be
Yeah, the
prepared
way
for it.
Nancy described it, it sounds like she's got a temporary borrowing out there already for what she anticipates for the rest of the project. And even if they're anticipating high, but you might want to just double check
I will,
that,
absolutely.
please.
Excellent. Next, we get into general business articles, so we're away from the financial articles. So Article 18 comes in from the Board of Water Commissioners to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Water Commissioners to hire legal counsel or take any other action in relation thereto. Article 19 is a proposed bylaw, and this is regarding the common, prohibited driving and parking bylaw, and this makes it a prohibition to drive or park on the common. Article 20 is the article that seeks to accept the Nashua, Squanicook, and Nissitissit River Stewardship Plan developed by the Nashua River Wild and Scenic River Study Committee. It is, as it says, there's a little bit deeper description in the description section. Article 21 comes in from the fire chief. Excuse me, it's an article seeking to amend the Chapter 6 bylaw automatic fire alarm systems, and in very specific places replace the word master with radio throughout the bylaw. Under section 6.2 definitions 1, insert or private monitoring service in the definition. 6.2 restriction on tape dialers and similar automatic telephone devices, delete the section in its entirety. Section 6.5 alarm system malfunctions fines. Excuse me. Define allowable alarm malfunctions as per calendar year, and increase fourth offense fine from, an offense should be an S, from 50 to 250, increased fifth and subsequent to 300. The chief had submitted that at 500, but in council's review it comes back statutorily we're capped at 300. Delete paragraph C and D in their entirety. So the fire chief will be able to speak in detail to that on the floor.
Is there going to be a copy at town meeting of the bylaw itself?
I would imagine there should be.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I'll speak with the chief to make certain that he's prepped to have something for that.
Thank you.
You next get to Article 22, adoptions by majority vote. The first is to allow the treasurer collector to change the cost of municipal lien certificates to set a fee schedule set forth in statute. She had originally submitted a figure, which is consistent with neighboring communities. Council came back and said it should say as set forth in the statute. That means if the statute changes in 5 years, we're automatically there. Article 23, to see if the town will vote to accept the 12th paragraph. Those are new words that comes in from council. It's specifically the 12th paragraph of Chapter 41, Section 81U. This allows the planning board to take and hold deposits to secure performance of an obligation by an applicant. We've been doing, this is one we've been doing for ever, but just had never gone to the point of accepting the statute that authorizes it. Article 24, real property articles. This is the request to seek authorization for the select board to issue a request for proposal, or RFP, for the sale of Squanicook Hook and Ladder Center Fire Station and Harbor Fire Station for adaptive reuse. You'll remember that originally there was language in there that talked about premium points being assigned for any applicant that came in with an adaptive reuse that was either fire service related or educational or nonprofit. That still could happen ultimately in the RFP, but it's not going to be a requirement from the town meeting vote. 25 is seeking authorization for the tax collector to hold a tax title auction on tax title properties held by the town. We've already had the, excuse me, the tax lien sale. You remember last year, it brought in about $250,000. A number of payment plans were entered into as well that have brought additional funds across the threshold. There are a number of parcels that weren't of interest to the companies that looked at the tax title liens. They're generally considered parcels of land of low value, so they might be back lots, or they may be wet. They may have other features that cause their value to be lower than people might have an interest in. You generally see neighbors to these parcels stepping forward to purchase, so it might be that, I've always wanted to have, a bigger shed in my backyard, but I don't have room in my backyard, but there's this parcel that's just sitting there that the town owns. I'll buy it. I'll put in a bid for it. Nobody else probably has an interest in it. I do. It at least puts it back on the active tax rolls, and that allows the homeowner to have additional space. And the last article is to authorize the Conservation Commission to accept a certain parcel of land. This, in its original form, was a little bit more detailed. You recall we talked last week about the fact that it was, I think, 10.35 acres of land, but it's been discovered that the full 10.35 acres isn't all owned by the person giving it. Some of it's in fact owned by the town already. So they're working out those details and expect to either have specific revised language in time for town meeting or move to pass over if they don't. And that's the last article for the town meeting.
Congratulations. Madam Chairman?
Yes.
I want to interrupt Mr. Crowther when he's on a roll there. If I could just go back to Article 21 for a second, if you don't mind. Where that came in a little bit late, which is fine, I just have a couple questions maybe that you have for us by next Tuesday's meeting. And one would be that legal counsel has reviewed that the chief. Okay, well, I didn't know that.
Yep.
So.
Yep. This, when I sent it to you, and I should have started with that. When I sent it to you, it said, the title of it is council approved.
I know that.
So
Okay.
yeah, I should have highlighted that. This has
No,
already
it's all right.
gone through vetting of council.
Just at the end here, you know that small details matter to me.
Yep, yep.
And the next thing is if we could have the actual document for next Tuesday so we can review that, because Andrea made me think of that.
Yep.
That it's nice to see exactly what the document is. I
Absolutely.
would rather, if there is any problems, I'm not saying there is, I would rather have time to work it out beforehand.
Yep.
Or have it. And then the last thing
If you're
is,
going to change something, you should know what you're changing.
well, I'd just like to know what we're talking about, that's all. And point well taken, Andrea, and your experience is always helpful, thank you. And then the last thing is, Mr. Crowell knows, whenever we do fees or fines or anything like that, I always want comps for everything. So if we could have next week,
Absolutely.
without putting too much workload on you, is to have comps.
I'm sure
to show us.
the chief has it. Yep.
But that's all, again, I just like documentation.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for letting me go back, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Crowell.
Do you have any questions, sir? Okay. All right.
Did we vote on all the articles as well?
You voted to accept the warrant, but you haven't voted whether you recommend or not. It'd be helpful if you did while you're on it, because then I can finalize this cover sheet, so your votes appear along with the Finance Committee's votes.
Do you want to go back through?
Yeah, it shouldn't take a great deal. I've got the cheat sheet here, so I'll just go through.
Do you have them all listed there, or just?
I do, all articles.
All articles, okay.
Prior year bills.
Okay.
Okay,
Got it.
you okay with that?
Yeah, we'll make.
I'm gonna, what work actually nicely is, I'll go through them, unless I hear somebody say object, we'll just do a consent vote at the end.
Okay.
Okay? Snow and ice? Presume yes. Water department software out of enterprise funds? Okay. Appointing officers, usual and customary. Reports, usual and customary. James H. Tucker Fund, usual and customary. Revolving funds, usual and customary. Town budget, you've already adopted. Set salary of elected official, usual and customary. Water enterprise.
What enterprise, just their operating funds?
Yep, their budget.
Thank you.
That's Article 7, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Article 8, capital plan, thank you, I'll read the numbers. Article 9, public safety infrastructure, the residual, 25,000. Article 10, water main replacement project. Article 11, town's 350th. Article 12, master plan consulting. Article 13, assessors inspections. Article 14, document shredding. Article 15, conservation land fund. Article 16, cemetery improvement fund. Article 17, stabilization fund. Article 18, water department council.
No.
Any other members have thoughts on that?
I'm gonna not, put me abstain, I'm not.
Well, there's pending litigation on the very
Yeah,
matter.
I know.
So technically, the board proper has taken a position on this already. So just let me know what I should put in the box.
I think that, as far as I'm concerned, I want to kind of stay neutral on that one. I would say abstain on it.
I have a couple of articles with the Finance Committee voted hold, which is a no vote. They were just holding. I don't know what word you want me to put in there. I have a no, I have a neutral, and I have a neutral.
I'm just, have we ever done no opinion from the board?
I don't know.
Well, we already have a litigation where we're saying no on that,
Madam
in the
Chairman.
litigation.
Yes, Madam Chairman. The reason I'm saying no is that only the Board of Selectmen can approve anyone with a higher legal counsel. So the answer is no.
All right, make me a no.
So we have a majority no.
That doesn't mean it won't
Abstain.
pass at the town
It's not the
meeting
vote,
floor,
it's
it's
just
up to
what
the
our
town meeting.
recommendation is.
It's not up to us, it's a
Gotcha.
town meeting item anyway.
Town common bylaw. River stewardship plan.
I want to, can we,
Yep.
the town, just the comment?
Yep.
I want to abstain on that, because I want to, I mean, I'm looking forward to see what the discussion would be with the, I don't want to,
You want to let the town decide?
I want to, yeah, I want to participate or listen to the conversation on the floor.
Well,
I should be
I
interested.
do too, and that's why I put it on there, because
So are you both saying, we'll put it on, but we're gonna leave it up to the tax?
I think I have to vote yes on it simply because I submitted it. I believe in it, because I just,
I'll take no position then, if you think.
I'm going to say, yeah.
I'm not against
No
it for it. I
position.
think the people should have a
So the
discussion.
board proper is no position.
guess so.
And it's not that I support your ideas.
I understand.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
it's
I
about is that
I just think that
it's
there's,
the people's common,
Yeah.
let them have a
They-
discussion.
they need
And I want
to.
to stay out of it.
and we haven't had Parks
Madam Chairman,
sit here with us.
Madam Chairman, we would have order back in the chambers.
You look confused,
Excuse me,
Finance
can
I
we
can't
have
hear
just
what you're saying.
a little,
FinCom looks confused.
It's non-financial, so they don't
it's
vote
not
on it
financial,
anyway.
so
Yeah.
they might be.
All right, 21 is the fire alarm bylaw.
Okay, 20, we didn't do 20.
Oh,
We skipped that one. I'd like to abstain from that. I've been in conversation with people and
Which
there's more
one? Which is-
the
conversation.
river stewardship
I
plan.
think there's some information out there that will be brought at town meeting floor, and I'd like to not be committed at this time to that one. I may change my mind one way or the other on town meeting,
Well,
but
I
right
mean,
now I'm going to stay.
we supported it when they came here, so I'm going to say yes.
I'm certainly in favor of conservation. I was out there cleaning the Squanicook, but
Well,
I'm not.
since
For
I
this
spent,
article, I need
since
to
I spent
have-
4 hours rowing for this thing and with the chief, spent a couple of days out there. He stayed in the canoe much more than me. I was in the water much more. I'm gonna say yes.
He was in the water a lot when that.
No, I was in the
day I
water.
went. When we weren't
We have
there for
yes.
days,
Yes.
but the chief was there both times, so.
Fire alarm bylaw, Article 21.
I would, Madam Chairman,
Hold for more information.
would that bother you if we do that next
No,
week?
Finance Committee has
It's
already.
not that I'm
already
against
held.
it, but if I asked, I want to see what we're voting on, and we don't see it right now. And I'm not saying I'm not, but, we don't know actually what we're voting on until, so next week we'll have it. And it's not going to mess you up, right?
No, no.
But that's up to
Finance
you
Committee
two.
has already used that that vote on things that they want additional information, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
I'll do a vote.
So,
Oh,
Doesn't
Thank you
matter.
both.
all right.
Fine.
okay, treasurer fee change,
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
planning board account,
Okay.
RFP fire stations. Tax title auction. And land acceptance.
So what do you need to come back to us next week for?
The fire alarm is the hold.
Good, I think it's good progress.
And then no position on the town common bylaw. Excellent, thank you.
Thursday night, the FinCom is meeting, we'll take a vote on ours now, I'll email you the results.
I'll be,
Oh, are you gonna be there? Oh,
I
nice.
wouldn't miss it.
I
I start now.
All right, so are we finished with the joint meeting with the finance committee?
Madam Chair, I believe we are.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to end your meeting and give you an opportunity to
We
escape.
actually thought you were already done and we had a meeting.
Oh, did you already? Oh, all right. You're welcome to stay, but, all right, so, now we're into the work session. Town administrator updates and reports, please.
One very, very minor issue. It has to do with Craven Field down in West Townsend. Keith Turgeon, league president for Townsend Ashby Youth Baseball and Softball. He has an interest in the fact that it is town-owned land under the care and custody of the Board of Selectmen, that the board authorize the Townsend Ashby Youth Baseball and Softball group to cut down trees on the property as the league can financially support. This would be a multi-year effort. And particularly they're looking at, right now the tree line is pretty close to the fence line. And additionally, there's a lot of overhang. So they want to, my understanding, I don't know, is Keith here?
Yeah.
Keith here.
Madam Chair,
Maybe
can we
Keith
ask him to
can
come up?
come on up and speak to it, yeah.
Sorry it's taken so long to get this here.
That's okay.
So tree cutting,
Yep.
the interest is to do,
Yeah, so we're looking to go about 10 to 20 feet from the edges of the field back to the edge of the property line, trying to get as much trees cleared. Right now, we're getting tons of branches and trees falling onto the field. This winter has been tremendously bad for us. We had one entire section of fence destroyed, and we've been taking large chunks of trees off of the field itself. So.
Are there any conservation issues? Tree removal there?
what I was going to suggest is making certain, whatever authorization you give, that we make certain that there are no issues with any other departments. The one concern, obviously, from a liability perspective, is it's town-owned land. So,
Right.
Keith and I talked a little bit about that originally, so I don't know if your plan is little stuff with volunteers, but anything that's going to be big
Yeah.
is,
Absolutely. Anything that's basically that we can cut with, a small chainsaw, we're going to try to take down. Short stuff that people can do. I mean, they're so close to the tree line, the fence lines, we don't want to chance anybody landing anything on our fields.
Right.
So, there's tons of small trees and brush we want to get out of there and try to burn it away.
so we do have on file waivers, liability waivers that have been used in a number of different situations. So I would also recommend then, if the board is inclined to grant the permission, that anybody that's going to be out with power equipment doing the work, sign a waiver, just, God forbid something happen. It's something that the town should not absorb the liability on.
And you said something about burning too, Keith?
Any of the trees and branches that we've been collecting, cutting down, we'd like to be able to burn them in the parking lot. So I
Is
spoke
that-
to the fire chief, and he said it was okay, he couldn't approve the burn permit because the town
That's
owns the
done
land.
but it's also done on a daily basis too.
Excuse me?
When you do a burn permit, you have to call them up that day
Right,
and
you have to
make sure
confirm that
that
the weather
it's a
is-
burnable day.
Correct.
And that has to all get done by May 1st.
End of this month, yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So we're running out of time.
Well,
Yeah.
plus, if you have a truck, I mean, depending on the size of the stuff that you're burning, I think starting this coming weekend, the the compost pile at the recycling center is open every Saturday, I think.
Great.
For a number of weeks, so if you don't want to burn it,
Any
or
way
you
we can
can't
get-
burn it if there's a restriction,
Any way we can get rid of
get
it
it
is
on a
great.
truck or
You can just get it on a truck and,
get it up there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we had a big pile that we just had one of our families come and they took it to their house and disposed of it. Or burned it from their own property instead of us having to do it at the field.
Yeah.
So it's just to get it out of the way for the kids.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
You want to say?
Sure.
First of all, thank you for coming, and thank you for your organization does for everybody.
Thank you.
I see here, I just been reviewing this here, is that there is 4 issues, and some of them are very
Yeah, we're taking up
common.
one tonight.
I know that, but,
Yep.
so I'm looking from, how many
Oh, that's the
thousand
only
feet
one
do you
we're
like to look from? From way up there, I'm taking a global look here, right?
Sure.
So the one issue that we're talking about is brush that needs to be burned.
Yep.
Is that, am I correct?
That's
here?
correct.
And Mr. Crowther sort of, and the other ones, I think we want to, but I think we're gonna have to get legal involved and whatever, and he'll take care of that and work with you. But
Sure.
I think that's more complex, and I have a saying, I like to do it once and do it right, so that it's good for a while. and-
Yep,
and-
absolutely.
okay.
We'd like to get these things
But at
taken
Craven
care of.
Field, it's an asset here, we want to appreciate that. I had a thought here, and only because of, Jim said about waivers, but when there's fires and this, all good intentions, but if someone's injured up there, or if the fire gets out, I'm not saying it's going to, but if it
Sure.
gets out of control, we burn down a house, who's liable, and all these things.
Yep.
Everyone said, well, well, that's my responsibility to make sure that the taxpayers, but on the other hand, it's our responsibility to facilitate good
Do you have
people.
running water there?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yep.
And these are all questions
Yeah,
we
I
don't know.
think we're supposed
But
to
I
have
sort of had
those
an idea
as
here.
rules.
Yes, that's one of the requirements, to have a hose within 20 feet, I believe.
Right. In short term, I sort of have an idea, and I know it's, but I like to think outside the box here, is our highway department, which is overworked, they only have like 4 employees, we used to have 10, but
Sure.
the proactive is that, I don't know, do we own a chipper up there?
I do not know.
Well, I think that it would handle the liability issue, and they probably could do it in hours, it would take you days to burn. So the liability, in the short term, not saying to do this every year,
Absolutely.
is that go up there with a chipper, and I would be in favor of, because it's town facility, we own the land, so that's not a problem. Our town residents use it. It's much more for the residents around, because there seems to be issues, I'm not taking sides,
Sure.
with the neighbors of the field.
Right.
So they're gonna be a lot happier, we're not smoke blowing in and safety, if there was a chipper. Now, the other thing is, I don't know if we have a chipper at the time, I know we're trying to update there, but I know in the past,
Their equipment, I know.
yes, but in the past, we've done mutual aid, just like the fire department does.
Okay.
We've loaned them front-end loaders, when they didn't have one, they loan us. I'm sure for Lunenburg, Ashby, or Pepperell, our new superintendent up there could maybe reach out to them, working with Mr. Kryler. I'm just talking as I box here, so. And then tomorrow, I can't believe we might have a chipper. I don't know that, to tell you the truth, and I don't like to, but I think a chipper in the short term is the safest way to address all the liability, because it's town of trained employees up there doing it. It's better for the neighbors, so we can try to get everyone to work together up there. And there's always a place for chips to go, right? So,
We're just looking to get rid of
All
it
right,
any way
so,
that's possible. We're happy.
here's the deal is, I'm thinking here on the run here, Mr. Kryler, if you could help me out here. Do you think that might be a feasible idea?
I can work with Keith on
All
that.
right, but the time is of the
Call
essence.
tomorrow.
Could we work hard on this and have an answer either way for you next Tuesday?
Fantastic.
Does that work for you two, too, or not?
We can do it offline.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
if you authorize.
No, I'm talking about if we can't get a chipper, I'm hoping we can, then we have to go to burn permit. But he'll give us time to find out about water and all that stuff.
No.
They've got water.
We have
He's got
water.
water on site, so we could authorize the burn permit tonight.
Yeah, I want to authorize
If
everything
he,
we can.
if he
right.
has to do the burn permit, but we'll try to get
There you
a
go.
chipper instead.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, if we can,
So-
that
so
would be
Jim-
fantastic.
It's all about, in a couple of minutes here, giving them a plan to go forward. Does that work for you?
That works
And
for
does
me.
that work for you, Mr. Kryler?
Gotcha.
And then most important, does it work for you too?
yeah, Jim, would you be able to help with the motion?
Working on it.
Thank you.
And I have one other question. Are any of the trees, is this all on the field, or is there any like on the street coming in?
Not the ones that we're concerned about.
Oh, okay.
There are stuff that's closer to the.
But most of the
the
stuff you
street
want to
line.
get rid of is already down, correct?
No. So
Oh,
there's a
wow.
lot of stuff that's already down,
Well-
but there's a
well-
lot of trees that are still up.
Well, that's that's separate,
Correct.
because that's gonna get into the neighbors, and I think they have a right to have a say about that.
Okay.
So, that's only my opinion, is if you cut that, well, if you're,
If
if
it's on their
you,
property, it depends.
I don't know, there's questions about whose property is where.
Oh, yeah, if there is a question.
Well, it's right here stated that.
Oh, but
another question.
We are only
I
looking at
had-
trees that are on town property.
Right, yeah.
So-
But
Okay.
So you're not gonna clear cut.
with that.
He's not clear cutting, he just wants to get the stuff that's gonna cause a problem for the field.
Madam Chairman, can we have discussion with the people trying to work on the town's problems, not people who want to be involved, who aren't elected officials?
Okay, I have one question.
Excuse me, ma'am, what are you swearing at me again?
I didn't swear at you.
All right, could you please stop with the negativity?
All right, has anybody talked to the tree warden? Is there any issues that,
Tree warden would only be if it's within the roadway or the right-of-way or scenic road designation.
yeah, that's what I was thinking of scenic road, but I didn't know if there were anything else that the tree warden would be helpful with on issues about the trees that.
that field
It's
is
town
pretty
property.
well set back. It's pretty well
It is,
set
yeah.
back, and it's all
We've
wood
got the
behind
pictures back
it.
there too.
Yeah,
So,
I remember when my kids used to play there. You've done a great job with that.
Absolutely.
On
Thank you
that
very
field,
much.
too. It
And
really-
my questions are, it's just get done right for you.
I understand.
And also concern everybody, so thank you for that. Mr. Krylik has a motion
Gotcha.
for us?
Two different motions. One would be move to authorize Townsend Ashby Youth Baseball and Softball to cut trees on town-owned property known as Craven Field up to a distance of 20 feet from the fence perimeter, consistent with A, town boards and commissions requirements, so if there's any conservation, and B, sign waivers for all those involved. So that would be the first motion.
So moved.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then the second would be move to allow Townsend Ashby Youth Baseball and Softball to A, use town staff and chipper to chip brush and wood product, if available, or B, file for a burn permit with the Townsend Fire Department to burn the brush and wood material consistent with fire department requirements.
Can I amend that, please? To waive the fee for the burn permit.
Nice.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then at a subsequent meeting, we've got issues 2, 3, and 4 that we weren't really scheduled to get into
And
tonight.
they complex,
But
just do
they're
it right.
Correct, I understood.
important discussions then.
I have one other minor thing. Are you familiar with geocaching?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so you know you got a couple geocaches up there, are they still there? I just wanted to make sure.
I haven't checked, but
I
I know
haven't
people
been up
told
there
me
for
that
a
there's
while.
some,
I
like,
just-
in the dugouts and they're around
Yeah,
and...
make sure that you protect them, don't let anybody destroy them, make sure that you protect them and put them back or in a.
I'll have to find out exactly where they are,
Or know
but-
how to, yeah,
Sure.
if you know how to get on geocaching.com,
Yeah.
you know, and take care of them and maybe contact the owner or something, I don't know. But you know what I'm saying?
I'll double
That's all,
check on
I
it.
just hate to have somebody lose their geocache because.
No, I understand.
And everybody likes to go in there and find those. Anyway. Okay.
All set. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anybody, Gordy, do you have a update?
So,
Well, come on, Gordy, you first.
Sue's-
Oh, Sue.
Thank you, Gordy. No, I don't have
Okay.
anything, thank you.
Sue doesn't have anything.
Well, that's
I don't-
good, but I'm being respectful.
Okay, all right, I'm
Thank you.
trying to take turns. Okay, I don't have any, I have nothing tonight.
Well, I have something, but I'll wait for you first.
You do have something now?
Well, small, but it's a checklist there, but that's all right. What, you want to go first?
She said she has nothing.
I'm all done.
All right, so quickly, on updates, see, I think a lot of them you're taking care of. So the public employees update is taken care of, right?
Yes.
We were supposed to put on here this week about just having a conversation about goals and stuff for him. Can we make sure that's on for next week? And you can be prepared for my inventory control at that time,
Gotcha.
all right?
Do you have inventory?
Huh?
No.
She said you have inventory?
No, actually, it's lack of control of inventory.
Oh. I thought you're getting short here. And
I am getting
if
short.
we were
but
gonna
I'll-
have to turn things in or something, I didn't know you had anything.
No,
That's what I thought.
I don't have much lead,
Okay.
but I'll do it. So anyway, getting back to this.
That's what I thought.
So next week, we'll have that on, please. And the mysterious, I think the nukes will be out of North Korea before we get to the status of legal use policy.
Oh, jeez.
It's I said that last week, that the nukes may be out before we get to this. It's been like 4 months, but maybe we can do that next
is
week.
all me.
All right, thank you. And then...
We're gonna move the nukes to Syria. That's what we're gonna do.
Okay, and updates, we're supposed to do public records destruction. You're now working with town council on that, so I don't need an update. notification of federal law enforcement agencies. You're working with town council on that. I don't need an update. Status of the police raid tactical vests, that is being addressed by town council. The only thing is, an update is that the person who that was assigned to never had a background check when he came to work for us. Moving on now, status of audits, that'll be next week, I hope. Okay. Geez, well, you know,
I'm looking.
we're getting short here, so I think pretty outstanding. So all we, in public employees you took care of, inventory, this things. Thank you for everything. I know you've been working hard with town council to take care of all these issues. I appreciate that. Madam Chairman,
We don't have any meetings.
close to my last update, so thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I've got approval of meeting minutes on my agenda. Do we have any?
No.
We don't
There
have
aren't
any?
any in here.
No, there's no meeting.
Okay, so it's just a standard line on here then. Okay. The next thing is review and sign payroll and bills payable warrants.
Madam Chair, I move that the board review and sign the payroll and bills payable warrants out of session.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Madam Chair, I move that the board adjourn at 8:50, no.
I got 8:50.
All right, 8:50.
Second.
Every
All
clock
those in
says something
favor?
different.
Aye.